governance is always referred to as the spirit of governance, because like we've said, governance needs to go beyond what the rule book says. It's not just adhering to the rules, it's about taking into account and keeping in mind the interest of all stakeholders, right? So I have a couple of questions that to me seem like governance conflicts, and I want to know what our scriptures have to say about them. Can the end justify the means? Because I think at various points in the Mahabharata, as laid out in your book as well, Krishna violates every rule of war. And yet he does that so as to be able to help the Pandavas win. Can the end justify the means?
You see, look at this. The assumption is if the rules are followed, then good will happen. This is what we are saying, right? If the rules are followed, then good will happen. So rules are almost good. First of all, this very idea is alien to Indian, because rules exist in a context. And the same rule in a different context may not apply. For example, you have a rule that says that if you obey the father, you are a good son, you should obey. Now, in the Mahabharata, there is Bhishma, who obeys his father. His father says one day that, he doesn't say it, but implies that he's unhappy because he's fallen in love with a young woman. So the young son, instead of, which is Bhishma, he was called Devavrata then, he discovers that his father has fallen in love with a fisherwoman. And he says that, he goes to the fisherwoman and says, I want you to marry my father. And the woman says that, I won't marry unless my children become kings. And the only way my children become kings is if you give up the throne. And he says, I give up the throne. And then he says that, anyway, what if your children fight my children? And he says that I will never marry again. So, the son sacrifices for the father. Now, what seems good in the Ramayana, because the son is sacrificing, in the Mahabharata has a terrible effect, because by that one act, he destroys the family tree. Because all children born after that are not born normally, they're born through the intervention of sages and the gods. And what ends up is the Mahabharata, the whole fight for the kingdom. So what appears like a good thing, because the son obeyed the father in the Ramayana, is a terrible thing in the Mahabharata. The same action. So we have to be very careful when we say rules equal to good, because as every good lawyer knows, the letter of the law and the spirit of the law are important. Now, coming to the Mahabharata, when you're talking about ends and means, let's ask ourselves what happens at the end of the Mahabharata war. On one side, you have the Kauravas, and the other side is the Pandavas. And let's ask ourselves, who would like this victory? So at the end of the war, 100 of the Kauravas are killed. Good, the villains are dead. So that must be naturally law. But let's look at the narrative, and this is unfortunately in modern retellings we don't focus. Each and every son of the Pandavas is killed. So you have 5 sons born of Draupadi. So Draupadi has, the villains have been killed, but all her 5 sons are killed. What kind of victory is that? So, well, I have got the kingdom, but your children are dead. And what happens to Krishna, who has made the war? He's cursed that 36 years later, his entire family will be destroyed. So in fact, everybody is losing. So the question is, the story is not about winning. Mahabharata war is about empathy. It comes down to empathy. Remember, when the war is being fought, Krishna goes to Duryodhan and says, I want peace, let's make peace, let's make peace. And Duryodhan says, no, I don't want to have peace. You see, there was an agreement, a contract, that for 13 years, these people who have gambled away the kingdom will go to the forest. When they come back, they will get the kingdom. So it's a very clear contract, right? At the end of that period, when one part has been filled, the other part has to give his end of the bargain. And
Duryodhan violates the contract or defaults on it.
He defaults. And then Krishna says, okay, fine. And he argues on calendar, he argues on time, he argues that, maybe they didn't live for 12, but I caught them before that. And he keeps arguing technicalities. And finally, Krishna says, enough. What about giving them 5 villages? And he says, no. Then he says, okay, how about a house with 5 rooms? And he says, no, not a needle point of territory will I give. Now, you see, this is where his intention is being released. Till then, he was following the law, he was following the rules, he was well within the rules, right? But his intention was dishonorable, and so he had to be pushed to the corner. And when he was pushed to the corner, what did you have?
It resulted in war, which ended up destroying most people's fortunes, right?
But you see, if the war had not been fought, this king would have thrived. A king who doesn't care for anybody else. So what kind of a society would have existed?
But what kind of God do we worship in Krishna when he broke every rule of that war just to ensure that the Pandavas win? I understand that his intent was to restore or to ensure that a king like Duryodhan does not get to continue. But yet, how can the end justify the means?
What is the end of the Mahabharata? Not the war. You see, that is the 12th chapter of the Mahabharata. There are 6 more chapters after this, which again is not part of common
reads,
translation.
Right. Yeah.
What is the original name of the Mahabharata? The original name of the Mahabharata is called Jaya. Jaya.
As in victory?
Victory. But there is another word for victory in India. It is called Vijaya. Now, why have they given this strange name Jaya to this book? Because you see, the story does not end with the war. There is a bloodshed. Nobody is a winner, as you can see. Krishna says a king who behaves like an animal, then the society is as good as not existing. So the Kauravas are killed, Pandava suffers. At the end of 36 years, we are told that the Pandavas die, and the eldest brother, Yudhishthira, who is supposed to have created this wonderful kingdom where all rules are followed and everything, goes to heaven. And when he goes to heaven, he finds over there imagine, he enters heaven. The moment he enters heaven, the first thing he sees are the 100 Kauravas.
In heaven?
In heaven. Now this is called the Svarga Aharonika Parva, the last chapter. And when he goes there, he sees, and remember, while he's walking up the mountain, he's given up everything. He's given up his kingdom, he's given up his wealth, his clothes, his cows, his gold. His wife dies and he doesn't turn around to look at him because he says they've given up relationships. His brothers die, he doesn't look back. He just keeps walking front. And when he comes to the gates of heaven, he's this great man who's given up everything. And when he enters, what does he see? He sees the Kauravas there. And he's furious. And he says, how can these murderers be kept over there? Where are my brothers? Why should my brothers not be here? Why should my wife not be here? And he started arguing. And they show the brothers are in hell.
So all the rest of the Pandavas are in hell?
Because in those 36 years, perhaps they were not all that great. We don't know. I mean, there are stories about it, details. For example, Draupadi favored one of the husbands. So Bhima was a glutton. And Arjuna was very insecure and conceited. So these kind of...
These were the reasons for which they were banished to hell?
Hell. But the point is not that. The gods ask, why are you so angry, Yudhishthira? And he says the gods are being unfair because the villains cannot be in heaven, right? Now imagine, why is Vyasa putting this twist in the tale? Because he wants to communicate something deeper. And he says, you know what, Yudhishthira, you great king, you have given up everything except your anger. For 36 years, you have killed these guys, right? They've been punished. You have ruled their kingdom for 36 years. So you've punished them. So why haven't you forgiven them yet? And if you can't forgive them, if you can't purge your heart of anger, what have you actually given up? Why should heaven be yours?
So he doesn't get a place in heaven?
No, he's being asked that. Because unless you purge your heart of anger and forgiveness, you cannot enter heaven. And that is Jaya. Not victory over others, but victory over yourself. And that will only happen when there is empathy in your heart. Yudhishthira does not display empathy. He's unable to forgive the villain. It's not eternity. They have done the crime, they have paid for it. This is what, remember, while Ramayana talks about the perfect king, Mahabharata talks about the process of creating the perfect king. And the process of perfect king is for the CEOs and the leaders and the managers to ask themselves, why are they doing what they are doing? Is it coming from exploitation? To exploit people and make lots of money and then travel in your BMW? Is that the point of living? Because then you're no different from the lion, the alpha male. In ancient India, you were supposed to sit on the throne, the lion throne, which means you're not supposed to be the lion. You have to outgrow the lion.
You have to conquer the lion.
The lion within you, your desire to be this great alpha male and dominate society. You don't have to be that. It's not about Vijaya, defeating the other alpha males and being wary of them. It is about Jaya, which is conquering the animal inside you that enables you to not be Duryodhan and say not a needle point of territory. I will not give an inch in negotiations, because you get this false sense of triumph. It is about discovering that why do kings exist? You don't exist to make money for yourself. You exist to ensure wealth is generated and distributed so that everybody in your kingdom can discover the purpose of life.
So does Yudhishthir get a place in heaven?
Eventually everyone does.
But the rest of the Pandavas, the 4 of them, are in hell.
There are infinite lives. This is just one of their many lives.
Okay, at the end of that life, does he get a place in heaven? I'm
Wait for the
curious.
next episode.
That's my technique. I have one last question on this. I can understand why the Pandavas went to hell. You explained it. Draupadi favored 1 out of 5 husbands. Bhima was a glutton. Arjun was vain. Yudhishthira still held on to his anger. Why in heavens did the Kauravas get to be in heaven? Considering that they were no better off.
You see, it's like asking during appraisals that, I don't think he's good enough to get the raise, right? Guys whom you hate get the raise, and guys whom you love don't get the raise. So we decide we know the rules of God.
Well, at least the rules of raises. If not the rules of
The
God.
best time to meet people is post-appraisal, and if they have everybody imagines who they consider as heroes and who they consider villains, and somehow it never matches that of the management. The management has heroes and villains of their own, and it doesn't match. The upstream and downstream gaze is very different, and everybody believes they know who belongs in heaven and who belongs in hell.
So I'm not saying that the Kauravas belong in hell. I'm curious to know that despite everything that they did, deny the Pandavas their rightful kingdom, be such horrible people, why did they end up going to heaven?
Well, the reason is because the land on which they died was considered to be very auspicious. So it was just luck.
It was just luck.
Good luck. They died on a land which was considered to be holy. That's all. But you see, the fact is, your stay in heaven is not permanent. You see, it's not heaven as, again, this is the problem of the Eastern, it's not heaven with a capital H. It is heaven with a small h, which is
It's not
Swarga.
a destination, it's a stopover.
It's a stopover because you will live in heaven for only a limited duration of time. And then you will move on to the next life and the next life. So it is like, Swarga is a place where you go when you have got enough equity. And hell is the place where you go when you have too much debt.
To send us your feedback, SMS BizSutra space your response or question and send it to 51818. Or you can email us at bizsutra@in.com. And you can watch this episode and the entire series on YouTube.